I sometimes found myself in Harlem on Saturday nights and stood on the crowds on 125th Street and 7th Avenue and listened to Muslim speakers. But I had heard hundreds of speeches like that in my time, and it seemed to me, anyway, that I usually tune such people out. What these men were saying about whites I'd heard before. I dismissed the Nation of Islam's demand for a separate black economy in America, and so on. But two things caused me to stand back and take notice. And this is, you see, what I was telling you a little bit about a moment ago. One was the behavior of the police. You see, now we're talking about white police from outside the environment. And I think that is the big problem. After all, and I'm not against people who want to become policemen and want to make their living as policemen. You can make your living as policemen, but it seems to me that that living should be in the environment that you're a citizen of, and not in someone else's environment. I know it's hard to sort that out, but that's the main. Neighborhood policing is the key to environments getting better. After all, as it is in Iraq, it's going to be the key to democracy in Iraq. By the way, we're not going to achieve neighborhood policing in Iraq, so we're not going to achieve democracy in Iraq. Because as you see, the neighborhood police in Iraq are frightened to death of the other people who are more extreme and tougher and more committed than they are, and they're going to all run away and hide when the chips are down. And so we're right back to square one, unfortunately. And that's, the police have to be as tough as the gangs, no matter what environment you're in. In fact, police have to be willing to stand up to the gangs and the thugs. And if the police aren't willing to do that and don't have the commitment, then ultimately the gangs and the thugs and the violent people take over. In the old days, you had vigilantes in this country. And maybe you should have vigilantes again in certain environments that take care of these things. But, until you have groups that are willing to stand down the violent thugs in any environment, you're never going to have a free and functioning society. Anyway, it was the behavior of the police. I had seen men dragged from their platforms on this very corner for saying less virulent things than they were saying. I had seen many crowds dispersed by policemen with clubs or on horseback. But the policemen were doing nothing now at all. And this was not because they had suddenly become more human. It was because they were under orders and or because they were afraid. And they were. And I was really happy to see it. So that was the first thing that he was impressed by, the power of the black Muslims as an entity that the police were frightened of. The behavior of the crowd, its silent intensity, 49, was the other thing that forced me to reassess the speakers and their message. I sometimes think with despair that Americans will swallow any political speech whatsoever. And we've been doing little else for the last bad years. You think things are bad now? As I told you, they were much worse back in this time. They're a lot better now, I can assure you. So it may not mean anything to say that this sense of integrity after what Harlem especially has been through in the way of demagogues was startling. The speakers had an air of utter dedication. The people looked at them with a kind of intelligence and hope in their faces. Not that they were being consoled or drugged, but as though they were being jolted. Power was the subject of their speeches. I heard, we were offered a Nation of Islam doctrine, historical and divine proof that all white people were cursed and were devils and about to be brought down. And this was revealed by Allah himself and his prophet, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The white man's rule will be ended in 10 or 15 years. The crowd seemed to swallow this theology with no effort. All the crowds swallow theology this way. Yeah, that's true even in the West Bank of Palestine. Anything that gets sent out to the crowds tends to get swallowed, unfortunately, by crowds until they go home and think about it. I gather in both sides of Jerusalem and Istanbul and Rome, and as theology goes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I had heard this kind of thing many times, 50, from various prophets. Elijah Muhammad himself was now being carrying the same